remind
Okay,
ourselves.
you gotta explain this one.
Let me explain to you how you read this slide, and you'll see how amazing it is. The gray lines on top, mostly on top, indicate the returns that the S&P 500 achieved for each of the years going back to 1980. You'll see that overwhelmingly positive. On average, it's 8.8%, 9% effectively. And that's the S&P 500's return since 1980. The red dot at the bottom, mostly at the bottom, or all at the bottom, are the low point which the S&P 500 reached during each of those years.
The decline.
And it typically, or on average, reaches a negative 13.8% return, or percent.
Decline.
So at some point during the year, it should typically drop. The S&P 500 should typically drop by approximately 14%. In other words, a 14% drop in the S&P 500 is not even noteworthy. Don't react, don't worry, don't panic. That's entirely normal. And does everyone follow how you read this?
Mm-hmm.
These red drops are par for the course. It's what we're doing. Also wanted to announce that there's the largest CPA firm in Brooklyn has partnered with us to develop a New York office. It's a culturally perfect fit. We come at it with the same perspective, background, training as they do as CPAs, steeped in numbers, and it's a very exciting move for us. So thank you very much for supporting us through this move, and we're excited to expand our offering to our clients. And a quick video before we introduce Rob Crone.
Wealth management is way more than simply managing money. We work together with estate planners, CPA firms, insurance brokers, and so on to create a totality that works for the long-term needs of the client.
I joined my father's firm in 2006, and we realized together that we could add a lot of value, especially as compared to our peers who didn't have the context or training of a tax advisor.
We're in the world of data-driven, evidence-driven investing. We are really counter-cyclical educators. When the market's going up incredibly strongly, we keep cautioning people to the fact that these things don't go up in straight lines forever. And when the market's doing poorly, we inform them, advise them that markets don't go down forever either.
Having the privilege of working with my father brings a lot to the table. We have all of his experience and gray hair, as well as the energy and enthusiasm of the next generation.
We view ourselves as kind of the quarterback of the financial planning team. Our primary role is to design and implement a portfolio that's responsive to the total financial situation of each client.
Taxes are the largest bills that most of us will pay on an annual basis. And if we can do anything to help minimize or reduce that expense, whether it's inside the portfolio we're managing or within the client's overall picture, we've achieved a lot.
Everybody in our firm really loves what we do. The emails fly at all times of the night, and from early in the morning they start. And you can sense the passion in every meeting, in every client interchange, and in the roundtable conversations that we have with our own group at the office.
Proudly having been in business and active through the 2008 collapse, I can tell you that our counsel and approach with our clients does work. We encourage and educate our clients to stay buckled in, to remain committed through the ups and the downs.
So RVW has really taken on a life of its own today, fulfilling the original idea of low costs, tax efficiency, and no conflicts of interest.
It's extremely rewarding when our clients achieve their goals, whether it's a gift to charity or a transfer of wealth to the next generation. That's why we do what we do.
Thank you. Really quickly before I introduce BlackRock and the skill set and the training that they bring to the table, for many of our clients, Social Security is not a huge source of their retirement income, but it still is important and needs to be considered. We've developed the expertise working with BlackRock to help manage and optimize the outcome from that source of income, and I invite you to call upon us to work with the BlackRock tools to help you and your family optimize what it is Social Security can deliver for you, your spouse, and of course the survivor of the two. Without further ado, here's Rob. Thank you.
I do need the clicker though. Thank you. All right. So good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Wow, Social Security. Clearly you guys didn't have anything better to do this morning. Actually, I think this is going to be a great use of your time. And the reason I believe that is if you think about it, every single person in this room, and I would argue every single person in America, bought Social Security in complete and total ignorance.
Right.
Think back to your first job. Show of hands of anyone here who got a buyer's guide or a user's manual. Those don't exist, do they? All you get's the deduction on your paycheck. I remember going up to my dad asking, "Who's this FICA guy? Why is he taking all my money?" I didn't get a very good answer. Now, in October of 1999, they did start to send us all a statement every year, try and summarize what it is we've been buying. But that statement is pretty narrowly focused. It really only talks about the money that you've paid into the system, and then the benefits that can come from those payments. It doesn't talk at all about money you might be able to collect off of somebody else's work record. It doesn't talk about all the options that you have. Now, it does cover taking it early or waiting. We have a pretty good discussion on that. There are a lot of other options they just ignore. And then probably most importantly, you won't find any discussion of strategy anywhere on that statement. Like, when should you take your money? So there's our goal for this morning. Trying to make you more informed consumers, God bless you, about a purchase you've been making your entire working lives. All right, let's dive in. Now, when I first started public speaking, one of the very first things I was ever taught was that any really good presentation always begins with statistics. So these are mine. These are the actuaries telling us that we're all living longer. I draw your attention to the bottom two bars. What they basically conclude is that for a couple that has reached the age of 65 in reasonable health, there is a 50% chance that one of you is going to live into your early 90s, and a 25% chance one of you makes it to your late 90s. Now, allow me to contrast the fact that we're all living longer with this statistic from Social Security. Namely, north of 70% of all the people collecting a Social Security retirement benefit today are collecting a reduced benefit. That means they took their money early, and maybe that's because they didn't think these statistics apply to them. And actually, if it was that simple, if this was just a longevity decision, this presentation would be all of about 4 minutes. Right? But it's not! I can talk to you guys for hours about this thing. Not that I will, but I could. And why is that? Well, this is a complicated program. Social Security is going to celebrate its 83rd birthday this August.
Wow.
That means the government has been working on this program for 83 years.
1930.
Oh, and they worked on it. So, where should we begin in trying to understand this complexity? I'm going to suggest we start with that statement that I mentioned earlier. Show of hands, how many of you here today have signed up for your statement online?
You can get
Ooh,
it
not many of
online.
you. All right, well, I would strongly encourage you to do so. And the reason is, page 3 of that statement has a section entitled, Your Earnings Record. This is a history of every dollar that you've ever paid the Social Security payroll tax on, going back to the dawn of time. Well, at least it's supposed to be. I think some of you here realize the fact that the government does make mistakes every now and then. And this particular form is not immune to those mistakes. Now, because they're going to use the best 35 years on this list to determine how much money you're ultimately going to receive, you need to review this list to make sure there aren't zeros in years you know you were gainfully employed. And January of last year, they ran out of budget to mail this statement to anyone under the age of 60. So if you're under the age of 60, you won't be getting a statement in the mail anymore. And your ability to audit this earnings record goes away. And you only have 3 years, 3 months, and 15 days to correct an error you find. Aren't you glad they gave us the extra 15 days? Now, they do have a couple of exceptions to that rule, so if you do find an error going farther back than that, you ought to call them up and try and get it fixed. They do have a phone number on the bottom of page 3 that you can call. You will need a W-2 or a tax return from the year you got ripped off. So that's another reason why you want to get after this sooner rather than later. Now, if you don't audit your own earnings history, guess who does? Nobody! So, that's why you need to sign up for this thing online. And I would encourage all of you to share that recommendation with everybody you know, regardless of age. Actually, especially for people under the age of 60, since they're not going to be getting a statement in the mail anymore to audit that way. They're going to have to go online if they want to audit it. All right. Now, they give you other valuable information. They give you estimates of how much you'll get at 62, full retirement age, and age 70. And the place I would recommend that you go to sign up for this is ssa.gov. Now, the reason I'm telling you that's my recommendation is because a few years ago, Social Security actually changed all references in their literature and their advertising, so they actually no longer encourage you to visit ssa.gov anymore. They would now like you to visit socialsecurity.gov, because obviously that's a lot easier to type in your browser than ssa.gov. Actually, I do have a conspiracy theory I'd like to share. Do I think they really made that change? I think that somebody at the agency noticed that if you accidentally type that in backwards, you might end up someplace you didn't want to go. So they're like, no, we can avoid all that if we just go with socialsecurity.gov. Anyway, you can type either thing in, they both take you to the same place. And again, as I mentioned before, that's advice I would suggest you share with everybody, regardless of age. Now, the rest of what we're going to talk about this morning, though, is geared towards a very specific audience. And those are people who need to make a decision about when to take their benefit. Are you going to take it early and sign up for the lower benefit? Are you going to wait till your full retirement age and claim your primary insurance amount? That's just a big fancy phrase that Social Security invented to describe the amount of money that you are eligible to receive once you reach your full retirement age. Now, for every month you wait past that, they give you a raise. They call those delayed retirement credits, and you can earn those up to a maximum age of 70. Now, I do need to point out that full retirement age is actually a variable. It became one in 1983. Congress was checking out the health of the program at that point, and they came to the conclusion, whoa, this thing's in trouble. We got to make some changes. So they did. They made a lot of changes in 1983. And one of the more significant changes was moving the full retirement age. So it used to be 65 for everybody. But now, depending on when you're born, it's somewhere between 65 and 67. For the first wave of baby boomers, of which I notice we have at least one here today, those being born between 1943 and 1954, you have a full retirement age of 66. For every year you're born after 1954, you will need to add 2 months in order to get your full retirement age. Were you worried about the math test? Because there is one. All right, so now if you're born in 1957, you're going to have a full retirement age of 66 and, don't all go at once, 6 months. Well done. A lot of confidence in the room with your multiplication skills. I'm impressed. Yes. So if you're born in 1957, you have a full retirement age of 66 and 6 months. If you're born in 1960 and later, you're currently capped at a full retirement age of 67. Now, for those of you with a full retirement age of 66, I'd just like to point out that if you decide to take your money 4 years early, you're going to be signing up for a 25% lower benefit. For every month you take it early, they ding you a little bit, and this slide's just summarizing how big those penalties are on an annual basis. Wow, 25% reduction. I mean, that's a pretty big reduction. Why would anybody sign up for that big a reduction? Why do people take it early?
They need the money.
Now there would be the number one reason why people take it early. Now, based upon that introduction, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to assume that none of you are here today because you have to take the money at 62, right? And actually, that does reflect the original intent of the program, quite frankly, right? To keep seniors out of poverty. So if you get to 62 and that's how you're going to pay the bills, of course you're going to take it at 62, right? But I don't think that's the audience we're talking to this morning. I think that you are here trying to decide, should you take the money at 62? And if that's the frame, let me suggest 3 things that you ought to consider before you collect early. First, are you going to stop working? That's kind of important. Social Security is supposed to be a retirement benefit, and as such, the government has a penalty system to discourage people from taking the money early and then continuing to work. I'm going to talk about that more on the next slide. Longevity is kind of important, right? The way the formulas work here, if you wait till 70 and then you pass away at 71, that did not work out for you. You take it at 62, set the new Guinness Book of World Records for longevity, that probably didn't work out either, right? So longevity is important, and we'll talk more about that. But I'm going to suggest that the single most important thing that you need to consider before you take your money early is whether or not you're married or you have been married, and what the age and earning differences are between the two of you. And that's where we're going to spend most of our time. But let me just quickly talk about this penalty system real quick. If you decide to take your money early and continue to work, you're going to discover that you're now subject to something called the work-related earnings test. Now, when I say work-related earnings, I'm talking about W-2 income, self-employment income, that kind of stuff. I am not talking about pension payments, 401k or IRA withdrawals, dividends, interest, any of that stuff. But if your work-related income exceeds the threshold for the given year, which for this year is $17,040, for every $2 that you make above that threshold, Social Security is going to keep $1 of your Social Security check. So it does not take a whole lot of earnings for part or all of that check not to show up. And if you're going to sign up for a lower check, then you're not even going to get. That may not be such a great idea. Now, I'd be remiss if I did not point out that the government didn't think that that particular rule was complicated enough for all of us. So they decided the year you reach your full retirement age, we needed a new test. You can actually make more money that year, $45,360, and then they're only keeping $1 for every $3 above that threshold. I don't know about all of you, but that just kind of sounds like random number day on the House Ways and Needs Committee. Yeah? $45,360, really? All right, anyway. This last item I have up here says that once you reach the month of your full retirement age, this test goes away. So at that point, you are free to collect Social Security, earn all the money you possibly can from work, and not have to worry about any of it being withheld. Now, if you make a mistake, you take it early and then you decide to go back to work, they will let you fix that using a piece of paper that they've created. That seems to be the solution to all problems the government identifies. Well, let's create a form to fix that problem. So here they've created the request for the withdrawal of application, and essentially what it does is it allows you to say, I made a mistake, here, let me send you back all the money you've sent me, and let's just pretend none of this ever happened, and I'll file later. And that's great, but in December of 2010, they put an additional restriction on the use of this form. You have to use it within 1 year of filing for your benefit. Because if you attempt to hit the do-over button after that, you'll find that they're going to deny your request. Notice the name, request for the withdrawal of application. It's not the demand for the withdrawal of application. So they will deny your request if you filed for your benefit more than a year ago. So what I'm saying is basically, once you've been collecting for a year, you're pretty much locked in and your decision is irrevocable at that point. Okay. Now, that's the downside of collecting early. It's a lower check, and if you're working, you've got this withholdings test to deal with. The upside of waiting is the raise. It is an 8% annual increase, prorated for every month that you wait. So if you wait 6 months, how big's the raise? 4%. Our division skills in the front row are strong. I don't know about the rest of them. Yeah. So 4% if you wait 6 months, or 32% if you wait 4 years. How do you decide between a 32% increase and a 25% reduction, and then every single option in between? Well, if you're single and you've never been married, it's actually quite easy. All you need to do is decide how long you're going to live. Right? You decide that you're going to make it into your mid or late 80s, you ought to wait till 70. You're not so sure you can put up with the rest of us for that long, you might want to take it earlier. The reason is that the only benefit you're ever going to be able to collect is your own. The math is pretty straightforward. If you take the money at 62, compared to money you would have received had you waited till 66, what you're going to find is once you celebrate your 78th birthday, every month you live past that, the government will have cumulatively sent you more money than the 862 decision. That crossover point for the 870 decision is 82.5. So again, if the only benefit you're gonna have access to is your own, how long are you gonna live? That's your decision criteria. If you're married though, or you used to be married, it's a lot more complicated. And that's because there are two additional benefits that you're eligible to collect that single people who've never been married are not. And while they're mentioned on the statement, they're not very well described. And I'm gonna venture to guess that most people really don't appreciate how powerful these two benefits are and how they really work. So I'd like to just take a couple of minutes to walk through both of them. So we're gonna start with the spousal benefit. This is a benefit that is available when both people in the equation are still alive. When one of the two people passes away, we will then talk about the very creatively named survivor benefit. The marketing department at Social Security spent a lot of time on that. All right, so let's stick with the land of the living and talk about the spousal benefit first. Now, I'm going to basically make 4 key points about this benefit. And to do this, I'm going to use a hypothetical couple to give you a few examples. So let me introduce you to Jordan and Alex. You'll notice Jordan has a primary insurance amount of $2,200. This means that based upon Jordan's work history, when Jordan reaches full retirement age of 66, Jordan can get a check for $2,200 every month.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll notice Alex has a primary insurance amount of 0. This means that based upon Alex's work history, there is no benefit available. Alex did not pay into the system for at least 10 years. Now, some of you might have noticed that I have strategically selected gender-agnostic names for my hypothetical couple.
Exactly.
So, feel free to assign whatever gender you would like to either or both of them, because it doesn't matter. Now, just so I don't have to keep repeating their names throughout the presentation, I will assign a he pronoun to Jordan and a she pronoun to Alex. But feel free to roll with whatever you want, because it doesn't matter. All right, first thing that you should all know about a spousal benefit is this. Any spouse is entitled to 50% of their partner's primary insurance amount once they themselves achieve their full retirement age. All right, that was a lot of words. What I just said as it relates to these two people is that because Jordan has a primary insurance amount of $2,200, when Alex reaches full retirement age of 66, the spousal benefit is equal to half of that, or $1,100. So this means at full retirement age, Jordan can get a check for $2,200, Alex can get a check for $1,100. As a couple, they can get $3,300 a month. Now, a lot of people think, all right, so I'm just getting half of whatever they're getting. That's not what I said. You're getting 50% of their primary insurance amount. Notice that if Jordan decides to take the money early and lock in a 25% lower benefit for himself, as long as Alex is willing to wait till full retirement age, she still gets the $1,100. Because it's 50% of the primary insurance amount, not 50% of whatever check Jordan is receiving. All right, everybody clear on point number 1? 50% of the other person's primary insurance amount once you're at full retirement age. That's point number 1. Point number 2. I mentioned full retirement age, $1,100. If Alex collects the money early, however, it's going to be reduced. Any money you take early is going to be reduced, right? But notice, there's a 30% reduction at age 62, not a 25% reduction. They really stick it to you if you try to take the spousal benefit early. But now, what if Alex didn't need the money at age 66? What if she was willing to wait? What happens then? Nothing happens! So, if you become eligible for a spousal benefit, and this is the largest check you're ever going to be able to collect from Social Security, please don't wait past your full retirement age to do so. Because for every month you wait, that's just money you're leaving on the table, and you're never going to get back. All right, so 50% of the other person's primary insurance amount. It goes down if you take it early, but it does not go up if you wait. Third point, there is some eligibility criteria for this benefit. So the first part of the eligibility criteria is length of marriage. If you are currently married to someone, that marriage had to have lasted 1 year in order for you to be eligible for a spousal benefit. There's a little asterisk next to that I'll get to later on. But generally speaking, you have to be married a year to your current spouse before you're eligible. If you used to be married to someone, that previous marriage had to have lasted at least 10 years, right? 1 year for a current spouse, 10 years for an ex-spouse. And if you are currently married to someone, that someone has to have filed for their benefit in order for you to become eligible for the spousal benefit. So in the case of our hypothetical couple, if Jordan is planning to wait all the way till 70, because Jordan wants the really big check, $2,900 a month, well, Alex can't collect the spousal benefit until then. And while Jordan got rewarded for waiting, Alex does not. But she's not eligible until he files. All right? Okay, we're gonna quickly move past this. And now we're gonna talk about, no, we're gonna skip that too. And we're gonna talk about the fourth point. So, we've covered 50% of the other person's primary insurance amount. Goes down if you take it early, doesn't go up if you wait. There's a length of marriage and a filing requirement in order to be eligible. And then the last point I want to make is, what if Alex actually did have a primary insurance amount? So Alex did pay into the system for at least 10 years. So we're going to give Alex a primary insurance amount of $600. So at some point, Alex is eligible for her own benefit. And once Jordan files, she's eligible for a spousal benefit. What happens? Well, she does not get to add the two benefits together. They're actually going to net them against one another in an overly complex and somewhat convoluted way. Now, I'm going to very quickly go through that complexity, but if at any point I lose you, what I'd like you to do is take both your fingers, stick them in your ears, and repeat to yourself, I get the bigger of the two, I get the bigger of the two, I get the bigger of the two. Because that's mostly how it works. Now, the reason it's a little different is as follows. So, at full retirement age, she can collect the $600 because that's her money. She could take it early, it goes down by 25%. She could wait, it goes up by 32%. But the moment that Jordan files for his benefit, it makes her eligible for the $1,100, which is the largest of the two amounts. So it creates a ceiling, a maximum benefit that she can receive. Now, there's this really interesting rule called the deemed filing rule. Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? And what it basically says is, if you're eligible for both, your own benefit and a spousal benefit, you have to take them both if you're going to take any of them. You can't cherry pick. And they're going to give you your money first, and then if there's anything left, you'll get that in the form of a spousal benefit. So at full retirement age, she gets her own $600. She gets another $500 of spousal money to give her a check of $1,100. And the reason that's important, that $600 is hers and $500 is spousal, is that if she takes it early, her piece of the pie got reduced by 25%, but the spousal piece of the pie gets reduced by the 30%. So she's getting a blending of the two reductions. That's where the complexity comes in. If she waits, sure, her piece of the pie went up, but the ceiling didn't. Hence my suggestion before. If this is the largest check you're going to be able to receive from Social Security, do not wait past your full retirement age, right? There's no upside. All right, any questions on the spousal benefit, right? We covered 4 key things you need to know. Are there any questions about those 4 things? All right, clear as mud. Let's move on to the survivor benefit then. And in the interest of time, wow, that didn't format well, did it? So we were going to skip the pie chart anyway. And in the interest of time, I also have to apologize to all of you. This is normally the part of the presentation where I tell an amazing joke. And it kills. But I got so much other stuff I still have to get to that you're just going to have to trust me. It was really funny. All right, the punchline to the whole joke is this, though. The spousal benefit and the survivor benefit, the amount of each of those are calculated completely differently. All right? So, in our hypothetical couple, if Alex were to look at Jordan's Social Security statement, on page 2, she would see an entry that says, Jordan survivor would be eligible for a $2,200 a month survivor benefit. So, Alex is thinking, okay, if he passes away, I get $2,200 a month. And what the statement doesn't say is that that's a big, fat, juicy maybe. Right? It doesn't explain that that number can actually be significantly different than the $2,200. And here's why. If Jordan decides to take his own benefit early, let's say at 63 and 6 months, and lock in a reduced benefit for himself, well, he's also just now locked in a reduced survivor benefit for Alex. Conversely, if Jordan decides to wait all the way till 70 and lock in the really big check for himself, He's also now just locked in a really big survivor benefit for Alex. I see this all the time. It is not uncommon in a married couple for the higher earner to think, wow, I have paid a lot of money into this system and my health history is not very good. I'm taking this thing at 62, so I at least get something. And the flaw in that logic is you're ignoring the survivor benefit. Because the question you need to be asking yourself isn't how long I'm gonna live, it's how long might one of us live. And if you remember my statistics from the beginning, they weren't just to impress you, there was a point to them. Right? There's a 50% chance that one of these two people is living into their early 90s. And it's probably Alex. Sorry guys, we got the bad chromosomes in this deal. Right? If you want 1833 or 2904, that's a pretty significant difference every month, isn't it?
Sure
So
is.
if you are the higher earner in a married couple, or you have a good relationship with the higher earner in a married couple, please make sure they understand how this benefit works, because the statement doesn't explain it at all. And it's the number one mistake I see people making. All right, any questions on that survivor benefit?
Just what if the spouse that passes away doesn't, what if they?
Oh, so what if, we'll go through a couple of scenarios. So what if Jordan passed away at 58, right? Never even was eligible to collect. What happens? Well, at the day he passes away, they calculate his primary insurance amount, right? He's put his best 35 years in at that point. He's not working another one. So his primary insurance amount is established. Let's say it's established at $2,200. That becomes her survivor benefit. So they will not penalize her because he dies early. Conversely, let's say he passes away at 68. He was planning to wait, but he didn't make it to 70 to collect. They will give her the 2 years worth of raises that he had accrued, right? So he made it to 68, so they'll give her a 16% increase over the $2,200. Question here.
Is the 35 years consecutive or any 35 years?
Your best 35 years regardless of when they occurred. So if at the age of 97, you made more money from work than you did during one of your best previous 35 years before that, you will actually see your check go up the following year. Okay? They recalculate your primary insurance amount every year. Any other questions on this? Yes?
So if Alex is older
Yes?
than Jordan,
Yeah?
should Jordan still take it at the full retirement age and then Alex kicks in?
Wow, that sounds like a strategy question, doesn't it? It's like we rehearsed this out in the hall. So, I think now we want to talk about collection strategies, right? My goal here up to this point was to just definitionally help you understand what it is we have to work with. You have an individual benefit, you have potentially spousal benefits, and you have survivor benefits. And it's really easy when you only have one of those to consider, your own, right? I showed you the graph. But when you're trying to put all three of those together, that's where the complexity comes in. And so what I'd like to do now is just walk you through a process of trying to sort through that complexity. Now, I need to just start off by putting it out there that, look, there is no perfect collection strategy for you. All right, let's just get that out of the way. The reason there isn't a perfect collection strategy for you is because you aren't capable of providing the information necessary to come up with that perfect strategy. Namely, you don't know when you're going to die. So because of that, there's a little bit of art and a little bit of science involved in arriving at a decision. Now what I'm going to do is walk through this process for our hypothetical couple, but what I'd like to point out is that each of your situations is unique. And you really should meet with someone to explore your unique situation and understand what the trade-offs look like so you can make an informed decision about your circumstance. So I'm going to show you how this process works for Jordan and Alex, but I just remind you that each of you can go through this exact same process with the folks here in the room today. Any of these advisors can walk you through this process, as Jonathan mentioned. So I just encourage you to keep that in the back of your mind as we walk through Jordan and Alex. So in essence, the start of this process is the recognition that you don't know when you're going to die. And so what I'd encourage all of you to think about is talking about, well, what does a lack of longevity look like for us? And what does some longevity look like for us? Right? We don't know which one we're going to get, but ideally we'd like to pick a strategy that does okay regardless of that outcome. So with Jordan and Alex, we're going to start with a lack of longevity scenario. You'll notice here that I have Jordan living through 75, Alex living through 84, well below the life expectancy of a couple that's made it into their 60s. their 60s, and we're gonna take a look first at how much money do they get if they both take it right away at age 62. So what we look at here is Jordan's benefit gets reduced by 25%, so he gets $1,650 a month, and he gets that check for 168 months, from age 62 through age 75. Now Alex, her $600 gets reduced by 25%, and she also gets that 30% reduced spousal benefit, right? Remember we went through that blending, so she gets $800 a month for 168 months. But then when Jordan passes away, Alex gets to step up to the survivor benefit for another 84 months. And when we add all those checks together, you'll notice that this couple gets about $607,000 out of Social Security. Show of hands, how many of you had any idea you could get more than $600,000 out of Social Security, even if you didn't live very long? Anyone? A few people? Right. I mean, it was actually one of the things that surprised me when we put this all together. Didn't quite realize the magnitude of the benefit. And that's interesting, $607,000. But what's really fascinating is how that number changes as your collection strategy changes. So now we're going to look at waiting till your full retirement age. So that means they don't get any checks for the first 4 years. But then the checks are bigger. $2,200 for him, $1,100 for her, and then a $2,200 survivor benefit. And even though they didn't live very long, they still get more money, about $633,000. Now, if they wait till 70, that means there are no checks for 8 years. But then the checks are huge. $2,904 for him. All right, she's still only getting $1,100 because of the way the spousal works. But then a $2,904 survivor benefit, and guess what? That was a horrible decision for them. That's $601,000. That's the lowest number up there. And that's why some of you are not going to want to wait till 70. Because if both of you don't live long enough, that's a bad outcome, and you've now just left more money to your least favorite beneficiary, Uncle Sam. Right? Nobody likes leaving money to that guy. So what if we were to look at combining different collection ages to try and maximize the amount of money they get back? So in a couple where there's a high earner and a low earner, the strategy that might get suggested would have the lower earner taking the money right away, even though it's reduced, having the higher earner wait as long as possible, because not only does that lock in the largest benefit for them, but it also locks in the largest survivor benefit for the lower earner. And then what's interesting here is when Alex called up at 62, she wasn't eligible for a spousal benefit yet because Jordan hadn't filed. So she gets her own money, but then after he files, she is eligible, so she gets to collect that extra $500, and that part isn't reduced because she didn't take that part early. So starting at age 70, she'll get a check for $950 every month. She doesn't get the full $1,100 because she took her piece of the pie early, and that's permanently locked in. But then she gets the $2,904 as the survivor benefit, and what you see is they actually get the largest sum with that strategy, a little north of $634. Now, we all did let me just get through this and then I'll take questions. Now, we all did pretty well, even if in our own heads on the math test, so I'm sure all of you are looking at these four numbers and you're coming to the conclusion they're really not all that different from one another, especially over like a 10 or 15 year period. I mean, who cares? Let's just take this money at 62 and be done with this. And if you knew that's when you were going to die, that'd be an awesome strategy. But you don't know that, do you? So that's why I encourage folks to look at, well, what if there's some longevity? How do the numbers change? So now I'm going to add 10 years to Jordan's life expectancy, 8 years to Alex, and we're going to see how the numbers change. Everybody ready? Now I need to let you know that I am working on a patent for this. We're going to push a button and we just all live longer. It only works in PowerPoint right now. All right, so here we go. You'll notice that our combination strategy still wins. They're now getting $1.03 million out of Social Security. But look where it went from last place to almost first place, $870. And look what's way in last place by over $170,000, $862. So here's the power of this kind of an analysis, right? You can meet with one of the advisors, share with them your dates of birth, your primary insurance amounts found on page 2 of your statement, and then whatever longevity assumptions you want to talk about, and have these numbers produced for you. And then you can have a conversation. If you were Jordan and Alex, you might be looking at all this information and you might conclude, you know what, we're still taking it at 62. I know we might be leaving $170,000 on the table, but we're okay with that. Or it might be, wow, $170,000, that's a lot of money. Honey, you're waiting until 70. But whatever you end up deciding, That's now an informed decision. Right? You're not guessing or going off some rule of thumb that Susie Orman tossed out on the Today Show. Or worse, the bartender at the Bellagio. That's my favorite story ever of a client who decided to take it at 62 because the bartender at the Bellagio pointed out, but dude, you could be gambling with this money right now. Oh, great, yeah, let me go up. So anyway, my point is, you really should make an informed decision, and the bartender at the Bellagio is not your source, right? But any of the advisors here can produce these numbers for you so that you can make that decision. And then you also need to understand, as Jonathan pointed out in the introduction, there's a lot that goes in to making sure they're taking care of your financial well-being. This is just one part of that decision. So discussing that decision within the context of your overall plan, that's pretty powerful as well. So just again, I'd encourage all of you to take advantage of that. I'd like to now just skip ahead to a couple other things. First, I do want to just briefly touch on strategies for widows or widowers and explain a unique feature of the survivor benefit that we haven't covered yet. So, two unique features. One is you can actually take a survivor benefit as early as 60. You don't have to wait till 62 like you do for an individual benefit or a spousal benefit. The other thing that I point out is it does not suffer from the deemed filing rule. Remember how I said if you're eligible for your own benefit and a spousal benefit, if you're eligible for both, you got to take them both. You don't get to sequence. That is not the case with the survivor benefit. You can sequence them. So you'll notice Chris, another gender agnostic name, so feel free to roll with widow or widower. Good earnings history, $2,200. Good survivor benefit from deceased spouse, $2,500. We might actually suggest that Chris take that survivor benefit first. And because there's no deemed filing rule, Chris can make that decision, leaving his or her own benefit alone to continue to earn the raise. So collects that survivor benefit for 10 years, and notice it's reduced, right? He or she isn't getting the $2,500 a month, only getting close to $1,800 a month. But I should point out that the reduction factor that's applied to survivor benefits is the smallest of all the reduction factors. They penalize you the least for taking a survivor benefit early. They penalize you the most for taking a spousal benefit early, and then right in the middle is the individual benefit. So again, Chris could take the survivor benefit for 10 years. Chris's own benefit is now grown by 32%, so at age 70, Chris can switch over to that survivor benefit and collect that for the rest of his or her life. That is so much more powerful, $250,000 better than just taking the individual benefit right away at 62. So again, you can sequence benefits as a survivor, and you should know that. There was actually a recent article put out where one of the congressional watchdog agencies noticed that the government was underpaying tens of millions of dollars to widows because they weren't fully disclosing the ability to do something like this to them at the point of collection, which in essence just reminds me to remind all of you, if you're going down to the Social Security office in person or calling them up on the phone or going to their website and expecting to get advice on what you should do, that is a mistake. You might get some advice, and it might actually be good advice, but you're equally likely to get no advice or even some bad advice. So what I would suggest is that when you go to Social Security, either in person, on the phone, or over the web, that you're going to place your order. You've already discussed your strategy with your financial advisor, and all you're showing up with is, here's what I want to do, please execute it. That is the safest decision you can make. You could luck out and end up meeting with someone down there who's been there for 30 years, is a very compassionate individual, and will walk you through every option and why or why not. But you may also get the 12-week rookie, who's a really important lunch date. They're not missing for anything. And so you're like, hey, just take it now, because I gotta go, right? Don't subject yourself to that. Know what you want before you go place your order. All right, last thing I want to wrap up on is my favorite part of this presentation. I do save the best for last. The reason this is my favorite part is because I'm pretty sure when I'm done with this section, every single person in this room is going to be able to call up at least one person that you know, and you're going to let them know about money they didn't know they were entitled to. And if you position that properly, that's got to be good for at least a bottle of wine, if not a full dinner. So let's put our thinking caps on, and I'd like you to think about anybody you know that meets the following 3 criteria. They were married to somebody else for at least 10 years. The person you're thinking about is currently unmarried. Doesn't matter about their ex-spouse. Their ex-spouse could have gotten remarried. That isn't relevant. And then lastly, both the person you're thinking about and their ex-spouse have turned 62. Anybody that comes to mind, you need to call them up and let them know they are entitled to a spousal benefit based upon the entire work history of their ex-spouse. Not just the period of time they were married to them, but the entire work history, and there is not a divorce decree on this planet that can prevent them from collecting that money. And once the ex-spouse passes away, as long as the person you're thinking about isn't the reason for their demise. All right, I need to point out that Social Security does not send checks to penal institutions or to sanitariums. So as long as the person you're thinking about didn't have anything to do with it, or they didn't get caught, they would be entitled to a survivor benefit based upon the entire work history of that ex-spouse. And a quick reminder, right, the spousal benefit was 50%, the survivor benefit's the whole McGill, right? Okay, a couple other things you need to keep in mind about this benefit. Notice unmarried. That's really important. If you share this information with someone and they begin to collect a benefit off of an ex-spouse, they need to realize that if they do meet the new love of their life, the moment that they say, I do, they are unhitching their wagon from the ex-spouse and immediately hitching it up to the new spouse. I'm actually waiting for all the dating sites to add primary insurance amount as one of the input fields. I think that would be important information to know. This is where the little asterisk comes up as well. Remember how I mentioned you need to be married to someone for at least a year before you can collect a benefit off their work history? This is the exception. If they were already collecting money off of somebody else, the moment they say I do, they can begin collecting off the new person. They don't have to wait a year. Okay, that's the little exception. 62. That's different than what we talked about for married folk. Remember, in a married situation, if your spouse doesn't file for their own benefit, you're not eligible for the spousal benefit. In the case of divorce, the ex-spouse doesn't have to file. The ex-spouse only has to turn 62. That's a different eligibility requirement in the case of divorce. Also, I want to point out that regardless of the decision the person you're thinking about makes, please realize it has no impact on the ex-spouse or any new ex-spouses or regular spouses that they've accumulated along the way. Because actually, this person isn't even going to know that the person you're thinking about is trying to benefit off their work history. Well, unless, of course, this person writes them a little vindictive note, thanking them for all the extra money they're now currently enjoying. At that point, they would know. Last thing I want to mention about this benefit is as follows. Nobody in America is going to get the following letter from Social Security. Dear dummy, I got a whole pile of money I could be sending you if you just call me up and ask for it. Now, again, they probably word that a little better, but they're not sending those letters because that's not how the system works. You need to know that you're eligible for the money, and then you have to call them up and ask for it. It doesn't just magically show up in the mailbox one day. And this benefit that I just described to you, it's not discussed anywhere on that divorced person's statement. Not even as a footnote. So there are a lot of people out there who have no idea they're eligible for this money, and it would be your civic duty to call them up and let them know. Now, if you got a lot of people on the list, I might caution you to spread those calls out over a period of time, because that could be a lot of dinners back to back to back, and that's probably not good for you. Now, because we are in the state of California, I do have to do just a little bit of extra credit before you start putting your phone call list together. There are 2 modifications to benefits that are unique to states like California. They're called government pension offset and windfall elimination provision, and essentially they impact people who did not pay into Social Security while they were employed, but instead earned a pension from that government entity. So let's think about teachers here in the state of California, a number of state employees here in the state of California, sheriffs in the state of Louisiana, teachers in Colorado. There's a number of folks. My point is, if one of the people on your list was a teacher here in the state of California, you might just want to cross them off. Because the way the government pension offset works is they're basically going to take 2/3 of their monthly teacher pension and subtract that from any spousal or survivor benefit they might otherwise receive. So if you're getting a $6,000 a month check for being a teacher, right, 2/3 of that is $4,000. There is not a spousal benefit or a survivor benefit that will survive, no pun intended, that reduction, right? There aren't any survivor benefits larger than $4,000. So that's why I'm just cautioning you. If they were teachers, you might want to cross them off the list, because the call would go like this: hey, great news! You are eligible for a spousal benefit. Oh, but it's probably going to be reduced to 0 because of that government pension offset thing. Right? So you might want to just skip that one, all right? Okay, look, I've covered a lot of information here. My goal was not to make anyone an expert, but it was to sensitize you to the fact that you have options to consider before you redeem this purchase you've been making your entire working lives. And you have some phenomenal resources in the room here today who can help you think through those options and arrive at an informed decision, right? Because for most of you, this isn't about being able to pay the bills. This is about getting your share of what you've already given Uncle Sam and making sure you maximize that amount you get back. And the folks in this room can help you do that. So with that, I'm happy to take some questions. We saw your hand go up first.
So 2 questions.
I'm only starting with one each.
One each.
But if it's a good question, I'll give you 2.
2. So is there a maximum, I think you said up there about 186 months. So the first question is there a maximum time that you can collect Social Security, or is it until death?
It's until death. So you can collect Social Security until you pass away.
Okay.
It is a lifetime benefit. So once you make your decision, that is the amount essentially you're collecting for the rest of your life. Your second question?
So the second, thank you.
Second question, on the, when we do our Schedule C for self-employed, and then on the 1040, the front page of the 1040, we're paying something that looks like Social Security. Is that counted in the Social Security benefits?
Yes. So again, for 2 things. One, as a self-employed person, you're actually paying your share and the employer's share in the Social Security. So you're paying 12.4%. Up to the limit, right? The limit's around $128,000, $129,000. So once you make past that, you're not paying Social Security payroll tax anymore. But yeah, you're responsible for all that. And then for the withholding purpose, so if you're collecting Social Security but still working and making, making those payments, again, if it's above that limit of $17,000 and change, that $2, $1 thing is going to kick in. Okay? Question here.
So Rob, thank you for an incredibly informative and delightful presentation. Not to complicate the combinations and permutations in some of your examples, but is the PIA inflation indexed, and when, and would that change the amounts you get because of the increase in PIA because of inflation?
So every single Social Security benefit, whether it's your own benefit, a spousal benefit, a survivor benefit, any of those benefits, they're all increased every year by the cost of living adjustment. That cost of living adjustment is announced in late October, and it coincides directly with whatever the Department of Labor said the trailing 12-month CPI index was. Right? So whatever the inflation rate was for the previous 12 months, that's what the cost of living adjustment to Social Security will be. So some people think, oh, there's mean Congress people deciding not to give us more money this year as a rate. No, there's no one deciding. There's a formula that determines what that increase will be, and then it gets applied to all benefits every year. All
So
right?
then that could change the decision.
No, it doesn't, because all the numbers move up. It's all linear, right?
Okay.
Now, what could change that is the time value of money, right? You take the money at 62 and invest it in the market. Now you're comparing market returns to the raise. And the calculator, again, the analysis that the folks here can run for you will allow you to include some assumed rate of return so you can have that comparison available. I would caution you, you should be picking a very conservative rate because it's for a specific 8-year period that it matters, right? From when you're 62 to 70. And I don't know anyone who can predict the performance of the stock market over a specific 8-year period, so you want to be careful. Yeah.
How does your strategy change if both partners have similar incomes?
So again, this is where the analysis will show, because again, as I said, everyone's situation is different. And generally speaking, what you're gonna see there is, depending on the age differences, it probably will suggest whoever you think is going to have the shortest longevity, wait the longest, which seems counterintuitive. But in essence, what you're doing is you're setting them up for the largest survivor benefit to the lower earner, and that once that happens, the lower earner's benefit becomes, irrelevant. So they want to get their money out as soon as they can, with the assumption they're switching over to the survivor benefit. But again, all of this plays out when you just look at the analysis. And again, it's a question of is it an $8,000 difference, and who cares? Let's just take it right now, or is it $180,000 difference? Right? That's fundamentally what the punchline to all of this is. Yes.
Hi, in your scenario, Jordan and Alex seem to be about the same age.
I had them in the exact same age because it keeps the math
What if
really
there's a
easy.
significant difference, say
That's
20
really
to
important.
30 years between Alex and Jordan
So,
and
really
their
important.
second marriages?
Yeah, really important, right? Because clearly there's a really, really, really high likelihood that one of those two people is going to outlive the other. And so that survivor benefit becomes even more important in that scenario. And then we didn't talk about dependent benefits, but when you see large discrepancies like that, oftentimes there will be minor dependent children at home, and there's a Social Security benefit available for them that we'd be happy to talk with you about if that's part of your unique situation as well. All right? Look, we've covered a lot of stuff, and I'm happy to take questions all morning, but I do recognize that people have lives to lead and places to go. So why don't we, you're landing the plane?
Yes.
All right, why don't we do that?
Well, if they were-
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that.
Thank you so much again.
Of course.
When we were searching for a speaker on Social Security, we were trying to search for the best one, and I didn't realize we were getting such an amazing speaker and an informative one at that, so thank you again, appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
And as a gift, I have something for you.
Oh, thank you. Very kind of you.
Thank you. It's a cufflink with the design of the great Andy Warhol with
Yes.
Benjamin Franklin, which represents the old wisdom. So thank you again, appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And BlackRock is a great partner of us, and in addition to the great tool that we have with the Social Security, we'll be happy to work on any of the analysis. Some of the investment funds we use is also fantastic, and it works with our investment philosophy. So one of the investment funds we use, it's fundamental driven. It looks for quality types of companies that has high return on equity, stable year over year earnings. And it's a fantastic overall. So again, thank you for being a great partner. And speaking of investment philosophy, we have the Wealth Blueprint book. It's a fantastic book on what to do and how to avoid the Wall Street traps. I've been there. So it has very good informative information on investing, written by Selwyn Gerber and Jonathan Gerber. So it's outside. If you could pick that up, that would be great. And thank you again for all of your time. Appreciate it.